Chapter 1, You're Carrying Too Much. Director Kaler Venn had spent his entire career eliminating unnecessary cargo. It was, in his opinion, the highest form of logistics, not moving supplies, moving only the supplies that were absolutely necessary. For 32 years, he had served within the Galactic Compact Bureau of Supply Optimization, where every transport route, warehouse, and cargo vessel was governed by mathematics. Every kilogram justified, every cubic meter accounted for, every shipment optimized. Waste was considered a professional embarrassment. His work had reduced freight costs across 5 sectors. In one celebrated campaign, he had eliminated nearly 14% of a relief fleet's cargo without delaying a single delivery. The Bureau still used that operation as a teaching example. Perfection was measured by what you did not carry. That philosophy had never failed, until humanity. The human Commonwealth had requested compact assistance during Operation New Dawn, a massive humanitarian deployment to the recently settled colony world of Astor Vale. A chain of violent earthquakes had shattered roads, ruptured water mains, and collapsed several spaceport warehouses. Nearly 2 million civilians required emergency support. Food, medicine, shelter, water purification equipment, power generation, engineering machinery. The operation would involve more than 300 transport vessels from 12 civilizations. Officially, Kaler had been invited to improve efficiency. Unofficially, he suspected he was expected to teach humans how professional logistics actually worked. The primary logistics hub occupied nearly 4 square kilometers beside Astor Vale's orbital elevator. Thousands of cargo containers stretched toward the horizon. Heavy lifters carried prefabricated shelters through the air. Forklifts darted between supply rows. Dock crews shouted measurements across loading platforms. The entire complex moved with astonishing speed. It also appeared completely disorganized. Kaler frowned as he examined the first cargo manifest. Then the second, then the third. His expression grew steadily worse. Chief Warrant Officer Helena Voss arrived carrying 2 cups of coffee. "You look disappointed." Kaler accepted one absent-mindedly. "I am confused." "That happens." He held up the data pad. "You've duplicated your water purification systems." "Yes." "You've loaded 2 emergency generators for every field hospital." "Correct. 3 spare communications relays." 4 complete bridge repair kits." "Right." He looked directly at her. "The operation only requires 1, she nodded. "If everything works." Kaler tapped another section. "You've allocated 7% of your cargo capacity to replacement parts." "Correct. Your projections only require 2%. "We know." He turned another page. "You're transporting extra fuel pumps." "Yes." "Duplicate hydraulic hoses." "Yes." "Additional electrical adapters." "Yes." "Reserve medical refrigeration units." "Yes." He lowered the datapad. "Why?" Helena Voss smiled as though the answer were obvious. "Because something's going to break." Kaler shook his head. "Your engineering reports estimate equipment failure at less than 3%. "They do." "Then carrying this much redundancy is mathematically irrational." She took a sip of coffee. "It probably is." That answer irritated him. "You acknowledge it's inefficient. I acknowledge it isn't optimized. Those are the same thing." "No." She smiled politely. "They really aren't." The following morning, Kaler requested access to the Human Commonwealth logistics software. Helena approved the request without hesitation. "Have fun." He did, for almost 3 hours. The system was remarkably sophisticated: cargo weight, center of gravity, fuel consumption, warehouse capacity, vehicle loading, personnel scheduling. It incorporated every optimization model used by the Compact. Then it deliberately ignored many of its own recommendations. Kaler stared at the screen. "That can't be correct." A logistics technician looked over. "Problem? Your software recommends removing 12 cargo containers." "It does. You overruled it." "We did." "Why?" The technician shrugged. "Chief Voss said no." Kaler opened the optimization report. The recommendation was flawless. Removing 12 containers would reduce total launch mass by nearly 800 metric tons. Fuel consumption would decrease. Transit time would improve. Loading efficiency would increase. Every calculation was correct. He searched for the justification attached to the human override. There wasn't one, only a single note. "Keep them." He blinked. "That's the entire explanation?" The technician nodded. "Pretty much." By midday, Kaler had produced a revised loading plan. He was quietly proud of it. Without affecting mission requirements, he had eliminated 4 generators, 3 water purification systems, 6 bridge repair modules, 22 pallets of spare mechanical parts, 1 complete maintenance vehicle, 8 communications relay units. The operation would require 9 fewer transport shuttles. He carried the proposal directly to Helena Voss. She reviewed it without interruption, page after page, occasionally nodding, making small notes. When she finished, she placed the datapad on the table. "It's excellent," Kaler smiled. "Thank you." She slid the datapad back across the desk. "Put it all back." His smile disappeared. "I'm sorry, the extra cargo." "Put it back." He stared at her. "You just said the plan was excellent." "It is." "It improves efficiency by nearly 12%. "It does." "It reduces fuel consumption." "Yes." "It shortens deployment time." "Correct." "Then why reject it?" Helena stood and walked toward the warehouse windows. Below them, hundreds of workers loaded transport vessels. Forklifts crossed paths without colliding. Mechanics checked engines. Drivers inspected tires. Cargo crews secured containers. Nothing dramatic, just thousands of ordinary people doing ordinary work. Without turning around, she asked, "Director Venn, have you ever watched a relief mission after the first thing goes wrong?" Kaler frowned. "Of course." "No," she looked back at him. "I mean the first real thing." He hesitated. "I'm not sure I understand." Helena nodded slowly. "Most logisticians don't." She looked across the loading yard once more. "The first shipment never fails because of the disaster. It fails because of reality." Kaler waited. "A driver gets sick. A forklift breaks. A bridge closes. A shipment gets wet. A connector doesn't fit. A pallet falls. A mechanic grabs the wrong part. A road disappears." She smiled faintly. "The earthquake is usually the easy part." The room fell silent. Kaler looked down at his beautifully optimized cargo plan. Every calculation was flawless, every recommendation mathematically correct. It was perfect for a perfect world. Outside, another transport settled onto the landing pad. Workers immediately surrounded it. One mechanic waved toward another loading bay. A forklift unexpectedly changed direction. Someone shouted that a container had been mislabeled. Within seconds, half a dozen people adjusted. No confusion, no panic. The work simply continued. Kaler watched the movement below, then looked back at Helena Voss. For the first time, he wondered if perhaps human logistics was not trying to solve the same problem as everyone else's, and that possibility bothered him far more than the extra cargo ever had. Chapter 2, Every Crate Has a Story. Director Kaler then spent the remainder of the morning doing something he had never needed to do before. He walked the warehouse floor. Normally, logistics happened on displays. Cargo appeared as colored icons. Containers moved across digital maps. Inventory existed as numbers. Warehouse workers were simply variables in an equation. On Astor Vale, everything had names. The logistics yard stretched for kilometers. Autonomous cargo haulers moved beside manually operated forklifts. Heavy lifters floated overhead carrying prefabricated shelters. Dock crews shouted measurements across loading ramps. Mechanics crawled beneath transport vehicles. Drivers compared route maps over cups of coffee. Nothing appeared especially organized, yet nothing seemed to stop moving. Chief Warrant Officer Helena Voss found him standing beside a stack of shipping containers. "Looking for something?" "I'm looking for your system," she smiled. "You're standing in it." Kaler gestured toward the loading yard. "I see thousands of people." "Good. I asked about the logistics system." "You did." She waited. "So," Helena folded her arms, "the people are the system." That answer irritated him almost as much as the previous day's discussion. "People make mistakes." "They do. They're unpredictable." "They are. Optimization removes unpredictability." Helena nodded. "Until reality adds it back." She led him toward loading bay 12. Unlike the rest of the warehouse, this section seemed unusually untidy. Bright strips of colored tape covered dozens of containers. Red, blue, yellow, green, handwritten notes appeared on cargo labels. "Open first, keep together, load last, medical priority, engineer request." Kaler frowned. "These markings aren't in the digital manifest." "No, why not?" "They don't need to be." He picked up one clipboard. A handwritten note had been attached. "Driver prefers rear loading." He looked toward Helena. "What does this mean?" "The driver unloads faster that way." "By how much?" "I don't know. You didn't measure it." "No." "Then how can you justify changing the loading order?" She smiled. "Because we've watched him work for 15 years. Kaler stared. "You altered cargo planning based on one driver's preference?" "No," she corrected him gently. "Based on 15 years of experience." He made another note. Further down the warehouse, Master Sergeant Raphael Akoy supervised the loading of engineering vehicles. Unlike Helena, Akoy rarely looked at a data pad. He simply watched. A forklift operator hesitated. Akoy pointed toward another loading lane. The operator nodded, changed direction, saved nearly a minute. A cargo crane paused unexpectedly. Before anyone reported the delay, Akoy had already redirected 2 trucks to another dock. One transport arrived early, another late. Without discussion, the crews adjusted. Nothing stopped. Kaler approached him. You've memorized today's schedule, Akoy laughed. No, you haven't. I memorized the people. The answer was so unexpected that Kaler assumed he had misheard. I'm sorry, the schedules change. The people don't. He pointed toward a forklift operator. Jenna, fastest loader in Bay 12, but she hates working refrigerated cargo. Another worker, Sila's, slow, but he never damages fragile equipment. Another, Priya, always checks the paperwork twice. You'll never lose a shipment if she's handling manifests. Kaler looked around. You know all of them? Akoy shrugged. Only about 200. The Compact never trained logisticians to know individuals. Only capabilities, warehouse capacity, 94%, forklift availability, 81%, personnel readiness, operational, everything reduced to statistics. Akoy appeared to carry an entirely different database, one built from conversations, habits, strengths, weaknesses, experience. An alarm sounded somewhere across the yard. One of the cargo lifters had developed a hydraulic leak. The vehicle stopped in the middle of the primary loading lane. Immediately, traffic backed up behind it. Kaler reached for his datapad. This will require rerouting. It will. He began calculating alternate assignments. Before he finished, the blockage disappeared. 2 mechanics had already arrived. Another forklift operator redirected traffic without instruction. 3 drivers voluntarily swapped loading positions. Someone moved a stack of engineering pallets before anyone requested it. Within 4 minutes, the lane reopened. Kaler blinked. No orders? Akoy looked puzzled. What orders? Who coordinated that? The master sergeant smiled. Everyone. That afternoon, Kaler reviewed the warehouse communication logs. He expected hundreds of official messages. Instead, he found remarkably little. Most problems had never reached headquarters. They had been solved where they occurred. A mechanic spoke to another mechanic. A driver spoke to a loader. A warehouse supervisor called an engineer directly. No formal requests, no waiting, no approval chain, just people talking. He confronted Helena that evening. This violates every principle of centralized logistics. She looked up from tomorrow's loading schedule. It violates centralized paperwork. Major decisions should flow through command. They do. These didn't. They weren't major. She took his datapad, scrolled through the list. Hydraulic leak, damaged pallet, wrong loading lane, missing connector, driver substitution, incorrect labels. She handed it back. How many of those needed a colonel? Kaler opened his mouth, then closed it. Helena continued. If every small problem has to climb the chain of command, nothing ever leaves the warehouse. The following morning, Kaler arrived before sunrise. The loading crews had already begun. Drivers checked tires, mechanics inspected engines, warehouse teams reorganized overnight deliveries, coffee cups sat beside manifests. People greeted one another by name. Someone laughed. Someone else pointed toward a replacement part already on its way before anyone had officially requested it. The work felt personal. For years, Kaler had believed logistics was the movement of cargo. Standing in the middle of the warehouse, he began to suspect it was actually the movement of trust. The containers mattered. The vehicles mattered. The schedules mattered. But beneath every manifest, beneath every optimization algorithm, beneath every carefully calculated shipment, there were people who knew one another well enough to solve tomorrow's problems before today's paperwork had even begun. For the first time in his career, Director Kaler Venn wondered whether the most important thing inside a cargo container had never been the cargo at all. Chapter 3, The Plan Dies First. Director Kaler Venn had spent 32 years proving one principle. A perfect plan could survive perfect execution. Until humanity, he had never realized those were two different things. The first convoy departed Astor Vale at dawn, 46 transport vehicles, engineering equipment, medical supplies, water purification systems, temporary shelters. Everything had been loaded exactly according to Chief Warrant Officer Helena Voss's original manifests, including every piece of cargo Kaler had tried to remove. The convoy crossed the Eastern Valley without incident for almost 4 hours. Then reality arrived. The lead engineering vehicle stopped. No warning, no collision, no enemy action. Its cooling system simply failed. Steam poured from beneath the engine cover. The convoy halted. Kaler looked toward Helena. The convoy has stopped. It has. You'll dispatch repairs. We already did, he frowned. Already. She pointed toward the rear of the convoy. A maintenance truck was already moving forward, not because anyone had requested it, because it had been traveling with the convoy from the beginning. The mechanics reached the disabled vehicle, lifted the engine cover. One shook his head. Split coolant hose. The other opened a storage compartment, removed a replacement. 10 minutes later, the convoy resumed moving. Kaler looked down at the manifest, the replacement hose, one of the items he had eliminated. He said nothing. The convoy continued. Another 90 kilometers. Then the route ended, not because the map ended, because the bridge did. The earthquake had damaged one of the main support piers during the night. The crossing had been declared unsafe less than 30 minutes earlier. Compact navigation systems immediately began recalculating. Estimated delay. 5 hours, alternative route. 173 kilometers. Kaler turned toward Helena. That's unfortunate, she nodded. It happens. Then she picked up the radio. Convoy 3. A voice answered immediately. Go ahead. Take route Indigo. A brief pause. Understood. The lead trucks turned before reaching the bridge. No confusion, no waiting, no consultation with headquarters. They simply changed direction. Kaler stared. There wasn't another route on the map. There wasn't yesterday. Helena enlarged the terrain display. A narrow mining road crossed the foothills several kilometers north. Construction vehicles had reopened it during the night. Compact mapping satellites had not yet updated. You knew about that? No, she smiled. One of our drivers did. The convoy reached the mining road 40 minutes later. Instead of losing 5 hours, it lost 23 minutes. Kaler quietly made another note. The third problem arrived before lunch. A communications relay failed. No signal, no diagnostics, nothing. Compact convoy doctrine required stopping until communications were restored. The human convoy kept moving. Kaler blinked. You've lost contact. We have. Shouldn't the convoy halt? Helena looked surprised. Why? You no longer have centralized control. She nodded. They still know where they're going. An hour later, communications returned. Nothing had gone wrong. Every checkpoint had been reached. Every delivery remained on schedule. Kaler frowned. What if something had happened? Helena looked at him. Then they'd solve it. By mid-afternoon, the convoy finally reached the largest refugee settlement. Nearly 40,000 civilians waited. Medical teams immediately began unloading. Then everything stopped. A logistics coordinator hurried toward Helena. We have a problem. What kind? The water purification system. What about it? The intake connectors. They don't fit. Kaler immediately checked the technical specifications. The coordinator was correct. The local pumping stations used older civilian fittings. The military purification systems used newer standardized couplings. The equipment could not connect. Compact procedure required requesting replacement parts from orbit. Estimated arrival. 36 hours. Helena looked toward Master Sergeant Raphael Accoy. Thoughts? He looked around the settlement, then toward a civilian maintenance shed. Give me 5 minutes. Kaler followed. Inside the shed, an elderly colony mechanic looked up from a workbench. Raphael smiled. Morning. The mechanic grinned. Morning. You still fixing everybody else's mistakes? Somebody has to. The two men disappeared into the workshop. 4 minutes later, they emerged carrying 3 brass adapters. Clearly handmade, worn from years of use, perfectly functional, the purification system came online before the first compact requisition request had even been transmitted. Kaler stared. Those weren't military equipment. No, they weren't even manufactured by your government. No, you trusted them anyway. Helena nodded. The water doesn't care who made the adapter. The convoy resumed unloading. Children received clean drinking water before sunset. That evening, Kaler requested every logistics incident recorded during the day's operation. He expected perhaps 3 major failures. Instead, he received a list containing more than 200 entries. One forklift battery failed. A pallet collapsed. A refrigeration unit overheated. A shipment arrived mislabeled. A truck tire blew out. A cargo drone lost navigation. Someone loaded medical blankets into the wrong vehicle. Someone else corrected it before departure. Most incidents lasted less than 5 minutes. None appeared in the official operational summary. Helena found him studying the list. Busy day. Kaler looked up. There were over 200 failures, she nodded. Roughly average. He looked genuinely alarmed. Average? Of course, she pointed toward the warehouse outside. If you move enough people, something always goes wrong. He looked back at the incident report. You don't define success by preventing failures. No. Then how? Helena closed the data pad. We define success by preventing failures from stopping the mission. The words settled over him. For decades, Kaler had optimized logistics around efficiency. Every unnecessary kilogram removed, every extra container eliminated, every duplicate system discarded. It had worked beautifully, as long as nothing unexpected happened. Human logistics appeared to be solving a completely different equation. Not how do we eliminate waste, but how many mistakes can reality make before we stop moving? Standing in the middle of the busiest logistics operation he had ever witnessed, Director Kaler Venn finally understood why the human commonwealth carried so much extra cargo. They were not preparing for a disaster. The disaster had already happened. Everything after that was simply another ordinary day. Chapter 4. Logistics runs on names. Director Kaler Venn had expected human logistics to depend upon software. It did. He had expected it to depend upon procedures. It did. He had expected it to depend upon planning. It certainly did. What he had not expected was that the entire operation seemed to depend just as much on people simply knowing one another. The convoy reached the Western distribution hub shortly after sunrise. Nearly 800 relief workers filled the sprawling complex. Engineers, doctors, warehouse crews, drivers, pilots, mechanics, civilian contractors, volunteers, compact personnel, human personnel. The place should have been chaos. Instead, it flowed. Kaler watched a truck arrive without warning. Its cargo manifest had not yet appeared in the central logistics system. The driver climbed down. A warehouse supervisor waved. "Morning, Lewis. Morning. Generator parts? Bay 7. The truck rolled away. No paperwork, no radio call, no approval. Kaler frowned. "The manifest hasn't been processed." Chief Warrant Officer Helena Voss nodded. "It will. The shipment was unloaded first." "Yes. How did they know what it contained?" She smiled. "They asked." He looked genuinely confused. "They trusted the driver. They trusted Lewis." Another transport entered the yard. Before it had even stopped, 2 mechanics were already walking toward it carrying replacement tires. Kaler checked the maintenance schedule. There wasn't one. "How did they know?" Helena looked toward the truck. "They heard it arrive." The mechanics changed both tires in under 15 minutes. The driver thanked them, signed nothing, then left. Kaler finally asked, "Who authorized that repair?" Master Sergeant Raphael Akoy looked up from a clipboard. "I did. You hadn't inspected the vehicle." "No, you didn't know the damage. I knew the driver." Raphael pointed toward the departing transport. "Amir doesn't ask for new tires. If he says he needs them, he needs them." The answer bothered Kaler. "Your system depends upon personal relationships." "It does. That's unreliable." Raphael laughed. "No, it means we know who lies." The words stopped Kaler cold. Late that morning, another problem developed. A convoy carrying medical refrigeration units arrived 6 hours early. The receiving warehouse was still full. Compact procedure required the convoy to wait. Estimated delay: 4 hours. Instead, one warehouse manager picked up a phone. "Janine." A pause. "You still have space." Another pause. "Perfect." He hung up. "Warehouse 4. The convoy changed direction. The problem disappeared. Kaler checked the records. Warehouse 4 belonged to an entirely different organization. "You just transferred government supplies to a civilian warehouse. Temporary. You didn't submit a request." "No, you didn't receive authorization." "No," Helena smiled. "We received cooperation." Kaler stared across the loading yard. "That shouldn't work." "It usually does." During lunch, he finally asked the question that had been bothering him for days. "How many people do you know?" Raphael looked puzzled. "What do you mean?" "Personally." The master sergeant thought for a moment. "A couple thousand." Kaler nearly dropped his cup. 2,000, give or take. You know them by name, most. "And that's considered normal," Raphael shrugged. "I've been doing this 24 years. He began pointing across the dining hall. "That's Aaron, best heavy equipment mechanic I've ever met. Over there, Chen. If she signs a cargo manifest, I don't need to check it." The pilot. "Marcus, he'll land in whether nobody else will touch." The civilian engineer? "Annika. If she says a bridge has 2 hours left, it's got about 1 hour and 59 minutes. Kaler listened quietly. Every introduction included the same thing, not titles, not ranks, reputations. That afternoon, exercise control introduced another complication. A warehouse database failed. Thousands of inventory records vanished. Compact logistics officers immediately halted distribution. Without inventory, nothing could be issued. The human warehouse continued operating. Kaler hurried inside. "This inventory system is offline." A warehouse supervisor nodded. "It is." "Why are you still loading trucks?" The woman pointed toward 3 older workers. "They know where everything is." Kaler looked around. No computers, no scanners, just people. One loader walked directly to the correct shelf. Another found replacement water pumps without consulting a map. A forklift operator located medical supplies from memory. Within 30 minutes, distribution returned to full speed. The database finally came back online. Inventory differed by less than half of 1%. That evening, Kaler sat beside Helena overlooking the enormous logistics yard. The lights stretched almost to the horizon. Vehicles moved continuously, some arriving, some departing, thousands of people solving thousands of tiny problems. "I've been wrong," Helena smiled. "About what?" "I thought logistics was inventory. It helps. I thought it was optimization. It helps. I thought it was software." "What? It definitely helps." He looked toward the workers below. But that's not what keeps this place running. Helena waited. Kaler watched a mechanic wave at a truck driver. A warehouse clerk already had paperwork waiting before the truck reached the loading dock. A forklift operator adjusted his route after making eye contact with another driver. No words exchanged. No orders given, just recognition. He finally understood. The software tells people where the cargo should go. Helena nodded. Yes. The people make sure it actually gets there. She smiled. Now you're thinking like a logistician. Before retiring for the evening, Kaler opened his notebook. For the first time in his career, he wrote something no optimization model had ever suggested. The shortest path between two warehouses is sometimes a friendship. Then, after a moment's thought, he added a second sentence. Cargo moves because of trucks. Operations succeed because of trust. Chapter 5, Redundancy Isn't Waste. 3 days into Operation New Dawn, Director Kaler Venn believed he finally understood human logistics. Then Chief Warrant Officer Helena Voss destroyed his confidence with a single question. What do you think redundancy is? Kaler answered immediately. Duplicate capability. Excess inventory. Reserve capacity. Waste. Helena smiled. I expected the first 3. She leaned back in her chair. The last one is why we're having this conversation. The following morning, the Joint Command Staff assembled inside the Operations Center. Exercise Control had prepared one final logistics comparison. Not a lecture, not a briefing, a demonstration. 2 identical humanitarian operations appeared on the central display. Same colony, same population, same terrain, same weather, same supplies. The only difference was that one operation would use compact logistics doctrine. The other would use human commonwealth doctrine. The first simulation began. Director Kaler watched with quiet satisfaction. Compact optimization software immediately demonstrated its superiority. Transport vessels flew at nearly full capacity. Warehouse utilization exceeded 98%. Fuel consumption remained exceptionally low. No unnecessary cargo, no duplicated equipment, no idle vehicles. The simulation concluded. Applause filled the room. Exercise Control displayed the results. Compact logistics, 22 transport ships, 800 personnel. 96% cargo utilization. Fuel consumption reduced by 18%. Estimated delivery time, 32 hours. Kaler smiled. Mathematics still worked. Then the human commonwealth simulation began. Immediately, the observers noticed the differences. 26 transport ships, extra engineering vehicles, spare fuel tankers, reserve communications equipment, duplicate medical refrigeration units, even empty cargo containers. Several compact officers quietly exchanged amused looks. One logistics commander leaned toward Kaler. They're wasting an entire freighter. He nodded. They usually do. The human simulation concluded. Human Commonwealth Logistics, 26 transport ships, 940 personnel, 78% cargo utilization. Fuel consumption increased by 23%. Estimated delivery time, 37 hours. The room relaxed. The numbers spoke for themselves. Compact Logistics had clearly won. Exercise Control smiled. Good. Now we'll begin. The room became quiet. One line appeared across both simulations. Variable 1. Bridge failure. The primary crossing disappeared. Compact optimization immediately recalculated. Every supply route depended upon that bridge. Alternate roads existed. But only one possessed sufficient capacity. Within minutes, traffic backed up. Fuel consumption increased. Medical shipments were delayed. Engineering convoys waited for clearance. Every optimization depended upon resources arriving at precisely the right time. Once the timing disappeared, everything slowed. The human simulation responded differently. One convoy diverted north, another south. Engineering vehicles already carried temporary bridge equipment. Medical supplies arrived from another warehouse. Fuel trucks bypassed the congestion using secondary roads. Delivery slowed. It never stopped. Exercise Control displayed the new numbers. Compact delay. 9 hours, human delay. 47 minutes. No one spoke. Another line appeared. Variable 2, warehouse fire. One distribution center vanished. Compact logistics froze. 31% of regional inventory had been concentrated inside that warehouse. Alternative storage existed, but much of the inventory now required redistribution before delivery. Thousands of containers had to be reorganized. The human simulation simply opened another warehouse, not because it had been planned, because one already existed, half empty, waiting. Another comparison. Compact delay. 16 hours, human delay. 1 hour. Kaler slowly folded his arms. Exercise control continued. Variable 3, medical shipment damaged. Compact doctrine rerouted replacement supplies from orbit. Estimated arrival. 21 hours. Human doctrine opened another container. Kaler stared. The replacement medicine had already been loaded, not because anyone expected that specific shipment to fail, because Helena Voss had insisted that every life-saving supply exist in more than one place. The simulation continued. Driver illness, fuel contamination, forklift failure, communications outage, navigation error. Incorrect shipping labels, bad weather, construction delays, labor shortage. Every problem was ordinary, none was catastrophic, yet each one removed another perfectly optimized assumption. By the end of the exercise, the original results had completely reversed. Compact logistics. Mission completed, 58 hours. Human Commonwealth logistics. Mission completed, 40 hours. The room remained silent. Director Kaler finally looked toward Helena. "You knew," she nodded. "We've run this exercise before." "No," he shook his head. "You knew your system would lose until reality arrived," she smiled. "Every time." Kaler looked back toward the display. "I spent my career removing redundancy." "You did. I thought unused capacity represented failure." Helena considered that. "It does," he blinked. She continued. "If nothing goes wrong, I wasted space." She smiled. "I celebrate that." The answer confused half the room. One compact officer finally asked, "You celebrate inefficiency?" Helena shook her head. "I celebrate not needing it." She pointed toward the simulations. "The extra generator, the spare bridge, the empty warehouse, the reserve trucks. I hope they finish every mission without being touched." She looked around the room. "But I don't build logistics around hope." Silence settled over the operations center. That evening, Kaler walked alone through Warehouse 4. Rows of shelves stretched into the distance. Some were full, others nearly empty. He stopped beside an entire aisle, reserved for emergency engineering supplies. Almost none had been used. Weeks of planning, thousands of kilograms, entire transport flights. Waiting, a younger compact officer joined him. "Seems like a waste." Kaler looked across the warehouse. A week earlier, he would have agreed. Instead, he smiled. "No," he quietly answered. "This is what tomorrow looks like before something goes wrong." Later that night, he opened his notebook. For years, he had taught that every unused kilogram represented inefficiency. He crossed out the sentence. Then he wrote another. "Efficiency measures how well a plan succeeds." He paused, then added one final line. "Redundancy measures how well a civilization survives when the plan does not." Chapter 6, Tomorrow Still Exists. The relief operation officially ended on the 12th day. The headlines celebrated the success. Orbital photographs showed repaired roads, power restored, hospitals operating, children returning to school. The reports praised the coalition commanders, the engineering corps, medical personnel, transport pilots. No report mentioned Warehouse 4. No report mentioned the brass adapters. No report mentioned the replacement coolant hose. No report mentioned the reserve generators that never left their crates. Director Kaler then noticed every omission. The official closing ceremony occupied the restored Civic Center. Flags from every compact member civilization hung beside the banner of the human Commonwealth. Politicians thanked one another. Fleet commanders received medals. News drones hovered overhead. Colonel Reth Oranes, commander of the Coalition Relief Force, concluded his speech with predictable words. "This operation succeeded because every organization fulfilled its mission." The audience applauded. Kaler applauded too, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He quietly slipped away before the reception began. Warehouse 4 was almost empty now. Rows of shelves that had once overflowed with supplies stood nearly bare. Forklifts sat parked with their batteries charging. Workers swept loading docks. Mechanics packed tool chests. Drivers completed the last vehicle inspections before returning home. The crisis had ended. The logistics remained. Chief Warrant Officer Helena Voss stood beside an enormous whiteboard. Every shipment had been erased. Only one sentence remained. "Lessons learned." Beneath it, nothing. Kaler frowned. "You haven't written anything." "We're waiting." "For what?" She looked toward the loading docks. "For the people who actually did the work." One by one they arrived: warehouse supervisors, mechanics, forklift operators, drivers, civilian volunteers, medical logisticians, loadmasters, supply clerks. More than 60 people gathered around folding tables. No admirals, no politicians. No reporters. Just the people who had kept the operation moving. Helena looked around the room. "All right. What broke?" Hands immediately went up. "The refrigeration connectors should have been packed with the purification units. The temporary shelters need better pallet anchors. The medical labels were too small. We ran short on infant formula during the second convoy. The replacement tires should have been loaded closer to the front. The reserve generators need standardized plugs. The cargo drones need brighter identification lights for night operations. No one defended the existing system. No one explained why things had gone wrong. They simply improved it. Kaler quietly watched. No blame, no arguments, no speeches. Only hundreds of years of collective experience becoming tomorrow's procedures. Master Sergeant Raphael Akoy walked to the front. He held up one small brass fitting. The same handmade adapter that had connected the water purification system on the first day. "I've got one." The room became quiet. "We got lucky." Several people looked surprised. Raphael continued, "I knew a mechanic. He had the part." "What if he hadn't?" Nobody answered. He placed the adapter on the table. "I don't want luck in the supply chain." Helena nodded once. "Action item." A logistics planner immediately wrote. "Standard adapter kit added to all purification systems. One line, one permanent change, one problem never repeated." Kaler stared at the board. "So that's how it happens." Helena looked over. "How what happens?" "Your system gets better," she smiled. "A little. Every operation." He looked around the room. The people were not reviewing failures. They were harvesting them. An older warehouse supervisor stood. "I've got another." "The handwritten loading cards." Several people nodded. "They're faster, but they fade in the rain." Another planner wrote. "Develop waterproof quick reference cards." Another permanent improvement. A driver raised his hand. "The emergency coffee station." Laughter filled the room. It worked. More laughter. But it was in the wrong warehouse. Helena looked at him. "Move it." Another note. Kaler smiled despite himself. His professors would have dismissed these discussions as trivial, tiny, administrative. He now understood that civilizations survive because of tiny things. The meeting lasted 4 hours. Not once did anyone ask, "Whose fault was it?" Instead, they asked, "How do we make sure nobody has this problem again?" As the room emptied, Kaler remained seated. The whiteboard had become crowded. More than 300 improvements. Most would cost almost nothing. A few required funding. All would make the next operation slightly easier. He looked toward Helena. "You've already started planning the next disaster." She shook her head. "No, we're planning the next response." Outside, the final convoy prepared to depart. Drivers shook hands. Mechanics embraced coworkers they might not see for years. Forklift operators exchanged phone numbers with civilian volunteers. An engineer handed a notebook to another engineer. Inside were sketches, measurements, lessons, experience freely given. Kaler noticed something else. No one was saying goodbye forever, only "see you on the next one." He looked puzzled. "There will always be another operation." Helena followed his gaze. "There always has been." The transport carrying the last relief supplies lifted toward orbit. The warehouse slowly became quiet. For the first time in nearly 2 weeks, nothing needed moving. Kaler stood beside the loading dock. "When I arrived, I thought logistics was about moving cargo." Helena waited. "I was wrong," she smiled. "I know. It's about moving civilization." She did not answer immediately. Instead, she looked across the nearly empty warehouse, every shelf, every loading bay, every vehicle, every worker. Then she nodded. "Close." He looked at her. "What did I miss?" She pointed toward an unopened emergency container. It had not been needed. Its seal remained intact, dust already gathered along its edges. "See that?" He nodded. "What's inside?" "Everything we hoped we'd never need," she smiled. "And because we never opened it, tomorrow still exists." Years later, Director Kaler Ven's report became required reading throughout the Galactic Compact Bureau of Supply Optimization. It did not contain revolutionary mathematics. It proposed no new algorithms. It introduced no advanced technology. Instead, its first recommendation read, "Optimize for reality, not perfection." The final page contained a single paragraph that would eventually be preserved in the Human Archive. Human Archive Entry 7428.4, Logistics. We believed logistics was the efficient movement of supplies. Humanity believed logistics was the preservation of possibility. We optimized for the perfect shipment. They prepared for the imperfect journey. We measured success by how little remained unused. They measured success by how many options remained when the unexpected arrived. Every spare hose, every backup generator, every alternate route, every empty warehouse, every experienced mechanic, every driver who knew another road, every lesson written after the work was finished. We called it redundancy. Humanity called it tomorrow. In time, we realized their greatest logistical innovation was not moving supplies more efficiently. It was making sure civilization could keep moving after the first plan failed.